Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Stroke Survivor Stories. Our guest today is Flannery O'Neill. How are you today, Flannery?
I'm doing wonderful and so happy to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited we finally hooked up. I apologize for all my follow-up mess ups, but stroke brain sometimes.
I know the feeling.
So anyway, let's go and get right into talking about your stroke. When was it your stroke?
So my stroke was February 2017.
Okay. And do you know when you first had symptoms, did you immediately realize what was happening, or were you even aware of stroke symptoms?
So I think my story it definitely starts before the day of my actual stroke. So when I finally had my stroke, I was aware that something significant was happening. But in the weeks leading up to my stroke, I had not been feeling quite right. I just had brain fog and just things weren't working quite right. And um, I came later on to understand that I had a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, the week prior to my stroke. But while I was having that TIA, even though I was in a doctor's office, we didn't put the puzzle pieces together that that's what was happening. And then a week later is when I had my stroke, and the symptoms were exactly the same, except worse
Yeah, yeah.
than when I had my TIA.
What type of stroke did you have?
I had an ischemic stroke that was based on a blood clotting disorder that I
Oh,
later on found that I had.
you weren't aware of that before, huh?
I didn't know that before, and I was living in a mountain town, so I was living in high altitude, and so I had a few factors that were going against me, and it eventually resulted in a clot in my brain that caused the stroke.
Wow. What limitations were caused by the stroke?
Most immediately, my main issue was speech. So when I had my stroke, I was completely nonverbal. I went from I was at work, I was with my boss, and we were having, a long conversation, and all of a sudden I got this really loud ringing in my ears, and I was not able to produce any sort of speech whatsoever. So I was awake, I was aware of what's going on, and I could not communicate whatsoever.
And any hemiparalysis? Any?
And then on the right side, so I was seated when it happened. So the right side of my body, I think, was, had issues, but I really didn't even try to stand. Once the EMS was called, they helped me onto a stretcher. So I probably didn't even stand for, I don't know, it was at least 24 hours.
Oh,
But so by the time they had given me treatment and moved me in hospitals, was, I didn't have any sort of walking until then.
did they find out about the pre-existing condition shortly after you got in the hospital, or?
So I was in the hospital for about 3 days, and they had started all of that testing, but I didn't find out the results until at least a week later. So I was already back home. So when I
Oh,
was
okay.
discharged from the hospital, again, because speech was my main issue, I was able to go home fairly quickly, but I was still very limited language, and but that was my main issue. I still do have um, sensation issues on the right side, so I don't feel like hot and cold and touch very well, but it all works. It
That's
just
scary.
you can't feel it very well. Yeah. Yeah, you just have to, even to this day, it's been 7 years, and I still have to remind myself, okay, put the left hand and, on the water, and just not don't touch hot things on the right side, because it takes a little bit for that to register.
What was your dominant side?
The right side.
Oh, it was. Of
Yeah.
course it
Yeah.
was.
And you learn to live with it, but typing on a computer and texting and all the things you just take for granted, riding a bike, you don't really think about how does that sense of touch help you balance. And it just is a learning process and a remembering process of it. One side of my body just works different than the other side, and differently than it used to.
What are some of the good and bad or bad things about your healthcare early on?
So, I mean, just the big positive, I was with my boss when I had my stroke, and I work in healthcare. So I worked at a public health department. My boss, the director of our department, was a nurse and knew exactly. I mean, we were sitting there and she knew immediately what was wrong and really jumped in, and is my hero. I mean, she did such a fantastic job of recognizing the signs and symptoms, calling for help, and then she stayed with me. She was my advocate because, again, I'm in a small town. All of my family lives across the country. My husband was out of town on a backcountry ski trip. So I am, I'm close with my coworkers, and my coworkers knew that, but I couldn't communicate that to my boss. But I had friends that worked with me and were able to jump in and say, "Oh, her husband's gone, dog is at home, and dog needs to get taken care of." That was the thing I was so worried about, is somebody needs to take care of the dog because she's home alone. Um, but then my boss never left my side until my family came. So she came with me to the hospital. She went into the hospital and made sure that I got the care that I needed, which I needed her as an advocate. And then eventually I needed to go to a higher level of care, which was a life flight across the state. And she flew in that plane with me and stayed with me, until my family was able to get there, and I just am eternally grateful for her and for that.
My gosh, having a boss like that is
Yeah,
like so few and far between
I know.
anymore.
She's incredible, and it was, we still talk about it to this day, just, how grateful that I am that she stepped up in that way for me, because to answer the other side of your question, I was in a really small town, and I mentioned the TIA. I was in a doctor's office when I had the TIA, and I was having all the classic symptoms, but they went away quickly, and so they let me go home, and they didn't say, "Hey, you need to go get this checked out in the ER." So that's number one thing that could have gone better. And then number two, the day of the stroke, you know, I went to the hospital. The hospital was only 10 minutes away, but because of my age, they were hesitant to believe, how bad my stroke was. I later was told that it was a moderate sized stroke, but they were hesitant to give me the clot busting medication, because it seemed like maybe I was getting better. But the getting better was, I could say yes and no. I mean, that was the extent of getting better.
Yeah,
I could nod yes and no. So I was almost outside of the window of time that they would treat you with that clot busting medication by the time they realized how severe my stroke was. And if it weren't for my boss being there and really being a bulldog on my behalf, um, I'm not sure that I would have received that medication in the time that I needed to. So, and it's what truly turned my situation around. Once I
yeah.
got that medication, they then, their protocol is to send patients to a higher level of care. So like I said, I got on that flight for life. Um, and by the time I was in Colorado. So by the time I got to Denver and got to that next hospital, I was already starting to have my speech come back. So really life-changing medication, and I know lots and lots of people have benefited from it. But I'm just really grateful that
Yeah,
everything, although slow, some of that care was a little bit slow. I got what I needed in the time frame that I needed.
yeah, I was single at the time and I had worked very hard that week. And when I woke up from falling asleep on the couch, nothing worked on the left side, blurry eyesight. And I took some ibuprofen and went to bed. I didn't know I was having a
Right.
stroke,
Exactly.
so it's like the awareness has to be raised a lot more. We all know what a heart attack is, but we don't know what a stroke is. You
I've
know,
heard so many times. So after I left, I came back to work. But I have since really focused my career on, um, supporting, improvements to care for stroke. And so I spent some time at the American Heart Association and have learned a lot about how acute care for stroke works. And I've heard many, many, many stories like yours where, we don't believe that it's going to be the severe thing that it is. And like, oh, I just don't feel quite right. I'm just going to take a nap. And it's important that we listen to our bodies and get that stuff checked out, even though we might think that we're overreacting.
Well, and the other thing is, in your case too, uh, I, what is it, 30% of new strokes are under 40?
I don't know the exact percentage, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's high.
and
And
it's
it's for the
increasing.
new, yeah, it's increasing for a variety of factors. And but thinking about getting home after my stroke, I was like, well, why did this happen to me? I've never met another young person that had a stroke. So here I am. I am just feeling like totally isolated, totally like why, just all on my own, even though I wasn't alone, right? I mean, I had this incredible community around me. And even yet, you just feel like so much has changed and you just feel lonely in this. And
Yeah,
on top of that, my language was really, it was really disrupted. So it was hard to communicate that frustration. And even if I could communicate that beautifully, I just felt so different. And despite the support of my friends and family who were wonderful, I um I just something just didn't feel right.
yeah,
And so it was a real healing process, from day one of just understanding what had happened, and the why behind it and what can I do to prevent it, but also just kind of wrapping my head around I'm not this healthy 30 something year old anymore. I now have this chronic condition. And I knowing the cause of my stroke, this could happen again at any time. Because I have this genetic blood clotting disorder. And so
yeah, yeah.
kind of reconciling that of like this kind of carefree lifestyle.
I find it interesting too. You mentioned you were in the healthcare industry. The EMS are in the healthcare industry, but nobody realized you were having a stroke except your boss. I
Right.
mean, my EMS, the first one, which is the first warning sign, is do you want to go to the hospital? And I said, no, who the hell wants to go to the hospital? Do I have to? And he said, no, you've already had your stroke, and he left. Yes, it's a true story, I swear. So, I mean, the awareness is so important for us to do, and that's why we do what we do. I
Right.
mean, we'll talk about what that is for you in a little bit, but you mentioned about the loneliness, about all those feelings that you're going through. Recovery is so physical, but the psychological part of it is something nobody warned us about. How has your way of thinking changed about the psychological part of it?
I think you're right on. So from day one, you're in the hospital. Assume you get to the hospital in time, right? And you're getting the care that you need. One of the first things after that you're stabilized is you're getting assessed by physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy. But like you said, no one said like, oh my gosh, this is a life-changing thing that happened to you. Like, let's just sit down and like talk about that for a minute. It was just like straight into like, what do we need from PT? What do we need from OT? What do we need from speech? And we still have to stay motivated to engage in all of that therapy. But I don't know about you, but my mind is just like swirling. Like,
Yes,
what is this? Why did this happen? Am I going to be able to go back to work? Am I going to be able to be in my family the way that I'm used to being in my family and engage in my favorite activities? I mean, all of these things. And it can be really hard to focus on the physical recovery that you need to do because your mind is just like running a million miles a minute. And that was really challenging for me. I mean, you probably don't want to see my Google search history from that because it was over and over like, am I going to be able to do this stuff? But that is a question that there's no perfect answer to, right? No doctor's going to be able to answer that question, no therapist. It is just us putting in the work, us being in the right frame of mind to put the work in, and letting the path unfold for us.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
seen really like, I mean, so much, our bodies are so incredible and we can heal from really, really challenging situations. And so that is where I had to like focus my energy, was like reading other people's stories, and seeing that hope was possible. And that is what helped me put one foot in front of the other, until I finally realized that I needed to make personal connections with other survivors, and build that peer community. Um, but that took me a while to get there, because I was just like laser focused on get my speech back, get to work, and I did those things. I was very fortunate to do those things. And then a couple months later, I was like, but I've come so far, and yet just something still doesn't feel right. Like, and that it was that processing everything that I went through, and truly like in deeply understanding the impact that the stroke had on me. And it was connections with other survivors, and it was going to a mental health therapist and really working through it that helped me, reading lots of books, all sorts of things,
yeah,
listening to podcasts. I mean, it was a whole bunch of stuff, but that is what truly helped me think about, how did this stroke impact me? How did it impact my sense of self or my identity? And who do I want to be in this kind of new body and this new self that I have?
yeah. I think I what I kind of hear from you, and I felt myself, was first of all, early on, it's why, and then all of a sudden it hits you. What now? What do I do? I
Yeah.
mean, and I agree with you about the survivors. It took me a year to find other stroke survivors. Actually, it took me three, because I didn't communicate with the others very much because of the situation. But yeah, it just slays me that we don't have an outline of what's happening or what might happen or what is going to happen. So we have to develop on that ourselves. What do
Yep.
you tell people that don't have that drive to do what you did?
Well, I think, we all come at it from different ways. We all have different approaches. But I think number one, having a good relationship with your healthcare team uh, is really important. And making sure that you're getting the support that you need from your healthcare team will help you in all of the ways that you may not be able to help yourself. So, um, you know, there are so many kind of conditions that can result from a stroke, including depression, anxiety, and things that might get in the way of us being able to recover in the best way possible. And it's so important to be open about those feelings and what's going on, and not being afraid to try, whether it's medication, whether it is different therapies, to help support you in that recovery. And that is something for me, that there are times where I needed only talk therapy to help me continue in my recovery. And there are times when I needed medication, anxiety medication,
Yeah,
to help. And that was incredibly supportive. But it wasn't forever. So some medications I need to take forever. I take like I said, I have a blood clotting disorder. I'm probably going to take some sort of medication for that for the rest of my life.
yeah,
Anxiety medication, I can take it for a while, and then I'm stabilized, but maybe there's another time where I'm going to need it, and I'm not going to hesitate to use all of the tools in my toolbox. And part of why I share my story and do the work that I do is to normalize the experience, to say what we're going through as survivors is unique to each of us, but there are lots of common themes. And one of the common themes is we've got a lot of great tools. They're not perfect, but there's a lot of tools in our toolbox, and we shouldn't be afraid to use them when we need them.
yeah. And what impresses me so much about what you're saying is you've accepted and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think you've accepted the responsibility to be in a community to educate and motivate other people with what you've learned from your stroke. Because you didn't know what you didn't know, but now look at all the things you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and advocacy and outreach is not for everyone. That's just who I am. And having the healthcare background and the understanding of how healthcare works, public health works, I just knew that I had an opportunity to take my professional experience and really lean into my lived experience, because it just makes the advocacy stronger. And we all can come at that in different ways. I also, you know, peer support is so crucial to me. That is what helped me um, step out of that feeling of isolation. You know, but I was in a small town, so there was no support group in my town, and so I was able to connect with some other survivors, and we started a support group, and I have continued to have a support group that's now for young survivors, although young is a broad.
Yeah,
There are no age ranges. It's just we tend to talk more about topics that might impact you on the younger end of the spectrum, but it really is open, and we have people of all ages in our group. But we have a virtual group, and we meet monthly and just talk about a wide range of topics. But that has helped me heal, and it also gives me the opportunity to pay it forward to the people who helped me recover. Now I can pay it forward, and that is just really powerful to me. I've learned so much in being in that group and being part of that group.
tell me, how's your recovery today? Do you still attend therapies or anything? How is things
I
going?
don't attend therapies. You know, I was able, my main therapy was speech therapy, and I did that, you know, really intensively early on. And then, you know, that I kind of graduated from that. And what they told me at the time was, well, because I am going back into the workforce, I'm going to be using my speech muscle all day, every day. So I don't need additional therapy on top of that. But what I will say is my brain functions different now, and
Yeah,
and fatigue has been a huge component of my survival, or you know, my story since day one. And I still encounter the fatigue. It's much improved, but my bandwidth is just less than it used to be, and it sucks. I know
yeah,
there's no way to get around it. It just like is not great. And again, it is improved significantly, but it's still a matter of, okay, what are all of the things that I need to do today? Or maybe look at it from a week. Okay, what, you know, I can't necessarily do everything in a day the way that I used to. And part of that is aging, but part of it is the impact of the stroke. And so when I overdo it, my speech is one of the first, and my just like clear thinking are the first things to go. And so I can like, I'll be typing or I'll be talking, and I'm like, okay, I can see that we're just tired, and we've kind of maxed out, and we need to just call it a day.
yeah.
You know, but it's important to recognize that, and because let's say you're driving and you're fatigued, that's not a good place to be. Like you want
No,
to be, you know, so I just have to be thoughtful of, okay, here are all of the things that I need to do, and pace myself in a way that I just never did before. So that has just been an impact. So again, not in therapy, but it's still front of mind. You know, if I'm gonna have a conversation like this, you may not, people listening might say, oh, well, she doesn't have aphasia. You know, I do. And
yeah,
you might catch a double word here or there, but also know that this takes a lot more brain power than it did, you know, before my stroke. And so
exactly.
you know, you have to schedule these things. Like I'm not going to do 5 interviews in one day. I have to like pace myself and really be mindful about that. And
And So your self-care is an important part of your
Yeah,
recovery right now, right?
absolutely. And
What
and thinking about technology, like, technology has been incredibly supportive for me, whether it is using my email, as kind of helping boost my memory, or it is, using the autocorrect, or some of the AI tools that are out there, that has just, or and even just voice to text, so I don't have to try to type with my fingers that don't work so perfectly. There's just so many tools that I can fake it a little bit in a way that I didn't have to fake it before.
what's the best part of your day now?
I think I just focusing on community, whether that is my community, my local community here, that's my family, that's my friends, or it is my stroke community, getting to just be connected with people who have walked that same path to me is just so incredibly powerful. And to be able to give people hope, because it can feel really daunting in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it is so helpful to have those stories of hope. And so I think what you're doing with this show and with the radio is so important, because we need these beacons of hope in our recovery, and just to give us the motivation to carry on, because it's that repetition, right? It's one foot in front of the other, one day, 2 days, and then suddenly you're like me, and it's been almost 8 years, and you're like,
Yeah.
things have changed so much, but in the beginning, it felt like, "Oh, I'm never gonna get there." And
And
yet,
you get to a couple dark places during that
yes,
time that you have to get through,
absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, Kind of curious, do you see yourself differently as a person now that you're in this stroke journey?
Yes, definitely. I think I was just so focused on work, 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 and like, how can I achieve through work? Now, I am married, but I don't have kids. I'm just a dog mom. So I did not have kids and family life in that way. And so my husband and I were really just kind of focused on work, and then going out and enjoying, recreational activities in our little mountain town. And but so much energy for me was focused on work, and I think that was to a detriment. And so it has been, this experience has helped me slow down, reevaluate my priorities, and also stop and smell the roses. And those roses for me is, how can I have meaningful experiences in work, but balance that with meaningful experiences, with my loved ones, with my friends, with my family, and in my community.
And you find that I found that on a daily basis sometimes, but mostly weekly or monthly, I have to readjust those kind of things. I've had a long time to learn that.
Yeah.
What are those priorities? How do I make it happen? Who do I need to help? Who do I need to help with? There's a lot of things that we learn from this journey that can be spectacular.
Yeah.
I often say this has been the most difficult thing in my life, but it's become the most rewarding. You know, what have you learned about yourself?
I think the superpower here is, for me, I used to think that I had so much control over what goes on in my life, what goes on around me, and for me, it has been a real unlearning of that, of learning that there are things that we have control over, but that circle is smaller, way smaller than I originally believed to be the case. And so I really think about that from I mentioned anxiety before. I had anxiety before the stroke, and it has, evolved after the stroke. But really, thinking through, how can I be my best and do my best in the day that I have in front of me, and not worrying about what happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future, but really trying to be focused on this present moment. something that I really struggled with early on, for a couple of years was just, is this going to happen again?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and knowing not everyone's stroke is from a condition like mine. Some are an accident, so puts you in a different situation than if you have a genetic predisposition.
right.
But for me, I really worried, like, this is gonna happen again, this is gonna happen again, and that really kept me from being in the moment and enjoying this present moment. So I've spent a lot of time really just checking in with myself. How am I today? What can I do today to make the world
Yeah,
around me a better place, and myself healthier, but not project too far in the future. And that
yeah,
has been very helpful for me as
yeah,
I readjust, like, kind of reset my brain.
yeah, yeah. You have to, I mean, goals became so important in my recovery, and it took a long time. Now, like I said, some of them are daily goals, some of them are longer, but some of them are for the next hour.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, we go through that too. If you were talking to another stroke warrior or TBI or just about anybody that's had a brain attack, just leaving the hospital, what advice would you give them and their families?
I really think the same things that we've been talking about, right? It is especially, my number one, when you're right leaving the hospital, it is just um one day at a time, and really going back to the basics, making sure that following, of course, the plans that your providers give you, but making sure that you're eating well and you're eating enough, getting plenty of water, and getting that sleep. And those kind of cornerstones are really important in the beginning. And for me, something that impacted me was I had no indication of when I was hungry or thirsty at the beginning. And so it wasn't me that was saying, hey, you need to drink this water, you need to eat this food. It was somebody around me saying, okay, you need to eat because you haven't eaten in a while. But for a while, I just didn't, that was part of what was damaged in my stroke. And so that sensation was not there. Um, so those basics of doing your exercises, but balancing that with rest
Yes,
and making sure that you are fueling your body for what it needs.
yeah,
And then know that you're not alone in this. And you being the person that's had this brain injury, but also the supporting people around you, that there is support for your caregiver or your care partner, however your people around you identify, that there is support out there, there is information out there, there are people to talk to, and the same goes for the survivor. Whether you have aphasia and communication is incredibly hard, or you don't have aphasia, but you have other challenges from your stroke, you're not alone. People have walked this journey before you, and they are waiting to support you.
yeah. Tell us how you, where career wise, I guess I should say, where has your stroke brought you in career wise?
So I was able to go back to work. I mentioned that earlier. I was back to work within a couple of months. I was back to full-time work, although I would say that it took a while to feel like, okay, I'm really fully here. And being back to work was incredibly challenging and very just physically taxing. So I would be at work and then I would get home and then couldn't do anything else.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so it took a while for that to kind of settle down. In the middle of that, I was fortunate to be part of a leadership training program that gave us a business coach. And so we're kind of a professional coach. And she really helped me explore this experience and what does that mean, and how might I make something good come from this. And it was through her kind of working with me that I realized that I wanted to spend time making things better for other survivors, because it doesn't have to be so challenging. We shouldn't have to hunt out for these resources or build our own resources, but
yeah,
that's a little bit of the case. So that's where I decided about a year and a half after I was back to work that I wanted to focus specifically on stroke. And I started first with the American Heart Association, who has done, I mean, truly life-changing work, especially in the acute care setting, to make sure that the best evidence-based care is available across the country. Is it available in every single, is every hospital the same? No. But particularly in the urban areas, the level of care that you're getting is really remarkable. Urban or rural areas, they're still working on it, but AHA
Yeah.
is just working very hard to get education out there about the latest and greatest and what is the best way to care for patients with stroke. So I spent a couple of years supporting that effort and learning all about what that looks like, including bringing awareness to signs and symptoms and awareness to why you should call 911 when you see those signs and symptoms. Because when you call 911, that clock starts ticking and your care starts happening immediately, and you get prioritized to the hospital that you're going to and in the line in the hospital. So I know that people can be hesitant to call 911, but it really does help jumpstart your care.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm very passionate about that, but a couple of years into my time at the American Heart Association or the American Stroke Association, I learned about this incredible organization called Stroke Onward. And they were in the middle of hiring at the time. And so I was able to join their team as their executive director. And their focus is purely on the emotional or the psychological impact that stroke has, bringing awareness to that aspect and impact of stroke, and building tools and helping shed light on the tools that are already out there, in the hopes that, number one, we're helping survivors have a better recovery, and number two, that we're going to be changing this healthcare system so that, like I talked about in the hospital, that maybe one of the first visits you get is also from a social worker or from just an educated person that goes, hey, I know that this is a huge change to your life. Let's talk about that as you put together your plan for recovery, and really plant that seed early, and then and repeat it often, that you're a whole person. This thing happened to our whole being, and it can impact our identities in lots of different ways. And so just be thinking about how can this impact your identity or your sense of self, like who you are, and what tools, what support do you need for that recovery that is about all of you and not just certain parts of you.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And there's a big growth now too. I'm sure you've seen it with peer-to-peer support. So that's something they should try and seek out as well. If your social worker doesn't know, there's someplace else to find it.
Yes. Yeah.
But
And peer support can come in so many different places. I mean, there are lots of big Facebook groups that people can find. There are in lots of communities in-person support groups. There are one-on-one places that you can meet other survivors. It comes in so many different forms, and I am the first to say that a support group isn't for anyone, not for everyone. I mean,
yes,
some people love them, some people are like, that's not for me. So maybe it's podcasts. There's lots of really great podcasts out there with information and stories of hope. There is radio like you're offering, there are books, there are movies, there are so many different ways to engage in that part of recovery. And that's just something for each individual to figure out what fits for me.
yeah, exactly. And I will say, since you mentioned radio, uh, we're the only station that covers stroke. It's an internet cloud-based station, but we're the only one that does stroke.
Exactly.
Some traditional radio has shows, but we cover stroke 24/7, and we're in 26 countries now. Isn't that
It's
great?
just it's It's phenomenal. And every day, I'm just in awe of what we do once we have a stroke, right?
Yes.
I haven't had other healthcare issues, so I don't know what it's like in the cancer community or the heart attack community, but every day I am just inspired beyond belief by how we take this horrible thing that has happened and turn it into just incredible things.
Yeah.
Your radio station is such a beautiful example of that. But
No, thank you. But
you see survivors writing book. I mean, just
yeah,
it's really it is inspirational.
how do people find out about Stroke Onward and what you're doing with them, Flannery?
So you can find us on our website, which is www.strokeonward.org. You can also find us on all of the usual social media channels. We are at Stroke Onward on Twitter or X, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we've been on numerous podcasts. If you search in your podcast feed, you'll be able to find us there. Just trying to get education out there, awareness out there, create new resources, and build a community of people that want to get connected and see some change to the care system.
And we'll be broadcasting Stroke Onward's Deborah and Steve's identity theft audio on the radio
Great.
soon too.
Great. Yeah.
So
yeah, and I
anyway.
appreciate you bringing up identity theft. Was a book, the book that our founder Deborah co-wrote, and then they founded our organization. But identity theft is an incredible book that talks about just what I was saying, that the impact to identity and steps that we can take to rebuild our lives and revision our lives after stroke.
Exactly. Anything you want to add today, Flannery?
I don't think so. I really appreciate this opportunity to share my story, hopefully give some hope to folks that are in the middle, in the trenches of recovery, that just recovery is possible, and a beautiful life after stroke is possible. It's just and to connect with others where you can, because that is just will help in your recovery.
Even years later.
Even years later. Yeah.
So, they tell us plateaus and all that garbage. It's garbage. There's never a plateau.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Flannery. I hope you have an incredible week, and I really, really appreciate your time.
You as well. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.